Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the second day of Virus Bulletin. Just as a reminder, if you have cell phones or such, if you could set those on stun, that would be helpful for our presenters. Today, we're going to be having a presentation by Eric Koppen on how they're getting the data out of your network. Everyone, please join me in welcoming Eric to the stage.
Hello, my name is Eric Koppen. I work for IBM. I'm part of the X-Force Advanced Research team, relative new addition to the team. Today, I'm going to be talking about exfiltration. I decided to cover a few scenarios rather than trying to tackle the entire broad topic of data exfiltration, just to give people an idea of some of the techniques that are being used. It's relatively high level. We're going to be talking about APT, everybody's favorite buzzword, the point-of-sale malware, which has been hidden most of the year, most recently with the Home Depot breach, and financial malware. In this case, I'm covering Zeus and more specifically the game over variant. And then I'll give some advice on maybe detection and prevention. So we're realizing today that just having your machine compromised is not the end of an attack. People are out for money these days, so customer data, credit card information, everything's fair game. All these different areas are places that companies can lose money. So addressing data exfiltration is a major issue to prevent damage both to the company brand image, customer loyalty, as well as the court cases that come in the wake of such breaches. So for advanced persistent threat, I decided to tackle ShadyRAT, and APT I decided to cover because it's kind of worst case scenario. It's very targeted attack, very targeted data collection, rather advanced C2. Basically, giving people an idea of what to do when the worst happens. So here we've got a basic overview of the attack scenario. Spear phishing email or something that's tailored for your particular target. Target gets compromised, there's lateral infection, and next thing you know, half of the computers on your network are exfiltrating data back out to some actor. So the data that's being targeted is different for each site. It's kind of hard to predict. You end up as a business or an institution trying to realize what is valuable to you and what would be valuable to other people, rather than trying to base your protection mechanisms over a standard set. As a result of that, the data types are different. In later examples, you're going to see that the data types are very clearly defined, whereas something like this, they can be after anything and everything. Data formats are thus different, so you're not necessarily going to know what to filter on at a device level. When you try to detect this type of compromise, the best thing you can do is monitor traffic, see what connections are going out of your network, and this is pretty common for the most of these compromises. In the case of ShadyRAT, they used a predefined handshake, so that became their calling card and the one thing that people could filter on. And next, we're going to talk about point-of-sale malware. If nobody had the chance to see it. The guys from Fortinet, Key, I think he was out there somewhere, did an excellent job covering point-of-sale malware. I got to take a look at some samples this year, and his presentation yesterday even taught me a bit, and I've been knee-deep in that stuff for weeks. So, yeah, around Christmas time, the target attack hit 40 million accounts. Here you see the statistics, PII data for 70 million people. In point-of-sale malware, there were a few basic steps, and Keith talked about this. There's the initial compromise, then there's memory scraping that goes on at the point-of-sale device level, and then they collect that data, either sending it right out from that device or collecting it onto another server, aggregating it, and then sending it back out. In the case of the samples we looked at, it was track 1 and 2 credit card data defined in ISO IEC 7813. It was pretty standard. Track 1 has name and credit card number. Track 2 is more just credit card number with some other data fields. The examples, the POS samples that I got to take a look at, most of them used HTTP posts and gets. We did see some stuff with FTP, NetBIOS. The most recent one that I took a look at was the backoff, the one that hit Home Depot. And that was using copying to a mounted network directory, at least in the sample that I saw. And that would assume that mounted network-mounted directory would have already been compromised. So that was handling more of the exfiltration, but getting it off of the original machine was as simple as a copy. And most of the time, after it collects this data, when it aggregates it, they stick it in a log file. And then before they send it out, you're going to usually either obfuscate it or format it in some way. A lot of times you'll see straight up ASCII, which would just be standard numbers going out. Other times you encoding, base64 encoding. We've also seen encryption. That gets a little bit harder to detect. Backdoor like to encrypt its data. I think it had a homegrown encryption algorithm. Again, if traffic is encrypted and it's going out of your network, looking at your data flows going in and out of your network becomes key. Otherwise, you can filter on the actual format of the track 1 and 2 information, or strange stuff going out in posts and gets. But if it's encrypted, filtering on a specific data format becomes impossible. So you have to do more of a behavioral analysis, checking who's connecting to what, whether, if you have a point-of-sale machine that is browsing the net and making HTTP gets and posts, and people aren't supposed to be using internet on that point-of-sale machine, obviously there's an issue there. So either it's a training issue for the retailer, teaching their people not to browse the internet, or maybe you've got a more serious problem where data is being sent out of your network. Next, we're going to talk about Zeus. I chose financial malware because it's probably the most likely that it's going to hit your average everyday user. In this case, I took Zeus and the game over just because it's one of the most ubiquitous. It's been one of the top malware forms of financial malware since at least 2010. One of my coworkers did a bit of work on the game over variant, and also the point-to-point version of the game over variant. Again, this one's caused a lot of damage, 100 million since 2011. It uses all these various techniques once it gets on a system. So it steals quite a lot of information. It's not all just something as locked down as track 1 or track 2 information. So there's a lot of various different data types and data formats to keep an eye out for. And it's changing all the time. Zeus seems to be constantly undergoing updates. So again, drive-by download or some other infection mechanism gets a Trojan dropper on the machine, scrapes all that information that I just covered in the last slide, and then starts sending it back out. Here's the point-to-point variant. So instead of having a single remote server, you end up having a network of point-to-point nodes. And sometimes these point-to-point nodes can also be on your network. So anytime a server goes down, a point-to-point node stands up and becomes a server. For detection, some of this point-to-point traffic, these keep alive messages that the point-to-point network uses is well known, and you can detect the traffic from the keep alive messages. Unfortunately, the payload messages are encrypted, so it's a little bit hard to filter on data types that are going out. But again, looking at your traffic behavior becomes key, and making sure that you're not connecting out on machines that should not be connecting out. So in general, there's the landscape of malware and exfiltration and attack techniques and exfiltration techniques is constantly changing. 3 months from now, there could be looking at entirely different issues that are not covered in these slides, but in general, the idea is still the same, that if you've got something valuable, other people are going to want it. So there are some keys for detection. One is knowing what data you have that's valuable, whether that's proprietary information, whether it's credit card data, whether that's personal information of your customers. If you can, knowing ahead of time what are the typical formats for that data can help you try and identify that data as it's leaving your network. Of course, if it's encrypted, it's a little bit harder to detect. And that's when behavioral patterns become important. So some common practices, standard network administration techniques can go a long way to help you out in detecting and preventing these type of issues, monitoring your logs, patching up to date, locking down acceptable communication, making sure your users are trained, making sure that if you have anomalous network traffic, that it's very obvious that it's not somebody doing something they shouldn't, that it's actually malware that's doing something you shouldn't, so you actually have the opportunity to block it. The more locked down you can have your roles defined on the network, the more likely it is that you can detect problems before they become $80 million disasters. And finally, educating users. That's pretty much going to be advice for any form of computer security. I know it's a little bit early, but I figured I'd open up the floor for some questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.